Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. We're going to learn about Steve Jobs' life in a simple and easy to understand way. This story is perfect for practicing your English listening. Birth, childhood, and family. Steve Jobs was born on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, California. His biological parents were Abdul Fattah John Jandali, a Syrian graduate student, and Joanne Schiebel, an American graduate student. However, Jobs was put up for adoption immediately after birth because Joanne's family disapproved of her relationship with Jandali. Paul and Clara Jobs, a working-class couple from Mountain View, California, adopted the baby boy. They named him Stephen Paul Jobs. Paul Jobs was a machinist and a veteran who fixed cars as a hobby, while Clara worked as an accountant. They were not wealthy, but were determined to provide their son with a good life. They promised Steve's biological mother that they would send him to college, a promise they would keep despite financial difficulties. Growing up in Mountain View and later in Los Altos, California, Steve was raised in what would later become known as Silicon Valley, the global center of technology and innovation. This environment would profoundly influence his future. The Jobs family lived in a modest home at 2066 Chris Drive in Los Altos, which would later become historically significant as the birthplace of Apple Computer. As a child, Steve showed early signs of intelligence and creativity, but also stubbornness and determination. His adoptive parents recognized his intelligence early on and encouraged his curiosity. Paul Jobs often worked on electronics in the family garage and taught young Steve how to take apart and rebuild electronic devices. This early exposure to electronics sparked Steve's interest in how things worked and were built. Steve was often described as a challenging child. He was bright but restless in school, frequently playing pranks and getting into trouble. His fourth-grade teacher, Imogene Hill, recognized his potential and bribed him with candy and money to study. Under her guidance, he thrived academically, skipping fifth grade and moving directly to middle school. However, Steve's early school years weren't always easy. He was sometimes bullied at Crittenden Middle School in Mountain View, which led his family to move to Los Altos to ensure he could attend a better school. At Homestead High School, he began to flourish, particularly in electronics and literature. During his high school years, Steve's interests expanded beyond electronics. He became fascinated with music, particularly the Beatles, and developed an interest in Eastern philosophy and counterculture. He experimented with LSD and other drugs, experiences that he later said were among the most important in his life. Steve also formed important friendships during this time. Most notably, he met Steve Wozniak, who was 5 years older and already an electronics genius. Despite their age difference, they bonded over their love of electronics, pranks, and music. This friendship would eventually lead to the founding of Apple Computer. In 1972, after graduating from high school, Steve enrolled at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, an expensive liberal arts school. However, concerned about the financial burden on his adoptive parents, he dropped out after just one semester. Nevertheless, he continued to audit classes that interested him, including a calligraphy course that would later influence the typography and design of Apple products. During this period, Steve lived a somewhat nomadic lifestyle. He slept on friends' floors, returned Coke bottles for money, and walked 7 miles across town every Sunday to get a free meal at the local Hare Krishna temple. He later reflected that this period of material simplicity was actually quite profound for his personal development. In 1974, Steve returned to California and began working at Atari, a pioneering video game company. There he saved enough money to travel to India with a friend, seeking spiritual enlightenment. This trip deepened his interest in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism, influences that would stay with him throughout his life. Upon returning to the United States, Steve reconnected with Steve Wozniak, who was building his own computer. This reunion would set the stage for the next chapter in Steve Jobs' life, the founding of Apple Computer and the beginning of his revolutionary impact on technology and design. Throughout his childhood and early adulthood, several themes emerged that would define Steve Jobs' later life and career: his adoption and search for identity, his interest in technology and design, his countercultural leanings, his spiritual seeking, and his ability to form key partnerships with technical geniuses like Wozniak. These formative experiences shaped the complex, visionary leader he would become. Education and formation. Steve Jobs' formal education was unconventional and brief, yet his intellectual formation was rich and diverse, combining elements of technical knowledge, humanities, Eastern philosophy, and counterculture influences. This unique educational path profoundly shaped his approach to technology, design, and business. Jobs' K-12 education took place in the public schools of Mountain View and Los Altos, California. At Homestead High School, he took an electronics class taught by John McCollum, which further developed his interest in technology. However, Jobs was often bored with traditional education and found himself drawn to subjects and activities outside the standard curriculum. In 1972, after graduating from high school, Jobs enrolled at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, an expensive liberal arts institution known for its intellectually rigorous program and countercultural atmosphere. His decision to attend Reed reflected his growing interest in humanities and his desire for a different kind of education than the engineering-focused options in Silicon Valley. However, after just one semester, Jobs made the pivotal decision to drop out of Reed. He later explained this decision in his famous 2005 Stanford commencement address. "After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out." He was also concerned about the financial burden his education placed on his adoptive parents, who had modest means. Despite dropping out officially, Jobs continued to audit classes at Reed that interested him. The most famous of these was a calligraphy course taught by Robert Palladino, a former Trappist monk. Jobs was fascinated by the beauty and artistry of calligraphy, learning about serif and sans serif typefaces, variable space between letter combinations, and what makes great typography. A decade later, this knowledge would influence the design of the first Macintosh computer, which featured multiple typefaces and proportionally spaced fonts, a revolutionary feature for personal computers at that time. During this period, Jobs also immersed himself in the counterculture of the early 1970s. He experimented with psychedelic drugs, particularly LSD, which he later described as one of the 2 or 3 most important things I've done in my life. He explored vegetarianism, fasting, and various diets, practices he would continue throughout his life. He also delved into Eastern spirituality, reading books like Be Here Now by Ram Dass and Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. In 1974, Jobs traveled to India with his friend Daniel Kotke, who would later become Apple's first employee. This trip was a spiritual quest to find enlightenment and to visit the Neem Karoli Baba, a famous guru. Although the guru had died before Jobs arrived, the journey through India had a profound impact on him. He returned with his head shaved, wearing traditional Indian clothing. And having experienced both the extreme poverty and the spiritual richness of India, this trip deepened his interest in Buddhism, which would influence his aesthetic sensibilities and his approach to product design, emphasizing simplicity, intuition, and the elimination of unnecessary elements. Upon returning to the United States, Jobs attended meetings of the Homebrew Computer Club with his friend Steve Wozniak. This informal group of electronics enthusiasts and computer hobbyists in Silicon Valley became an important educational environment for Jobs. While Wozniak was more interested in the technical aspects of computing, Jobs began to see the commercial potential of personal computers. The club exposed him to emerging ideas about computing and connected him with others who shared his interests. Jobs' professional formation also included his brief employment at Atari, the pioneering video game company, where he worked as a technician starting in 1974. Atari, he observed the company's founder, Nolan Bushnell, who combined technical knowledge with entrepreneurial flair. Jobs also learned about the importance of design in creating appealing products, as Atari was known for its user-friendly games. Throughout this period, Jobs was also learning from his friendship with Steve Wozniak, who was 5 years older and technically more proficient. Wozniak shared his deep knowledge of electronics and computing with Jobs, while Jobs began to develop his skills in recognizing commercial opportunities and motivating others. Jobs' intellectual formation was characterized by an unusual combination of interests: technology and engineering, art and design, Eastern spirituality, and Western counterculture. He developed a capacity to stand at the intersection of these different domains, which would later enable him to create products that were not just technically advanced, but also aesthetically pleasing and emotionally resonant. By the time he co-founded Apple in 1976, at the age of 21, Jobs had not completed a traditional college education, but he had acquired a unique set of experiences and perspectives. His unconventional education had taught him to think differently, to value intuition alongside intellect, to appreciate beauty and design, and to seek simplicity. These qualities would become hallmarks of his approach to product development and business leadership at Apple, Next, and Pixar in the decades to come. Early professional career. Steve Jobs' early professional career was marked by rapid success, dramatic setbacks, and the foundations of what would become one of the most remarkable business comebacks in history. His journey began in the mid-1970s in Silicon Valley, where the personal computer revolution was just beginning. Jobs' first significant job was at Atari, the pioneering video game company, which he joined in 1974 as a technician. Despite his unconventional appearance and sometimes abrasive personality, he often went barefoot and rarely bathed during this period. Atari's founder Nolan Bushnell recognized Jobs' intelligence and drive. At Atari, Jobs worked on the game Breakout and famously enlisted his friend Steve Wozniak to help reduce the number of chips in the game's circuit board. This experience gave Jobs insight into the video game industry and exposed him to a successful technology startup's operations. The pivotal moment in Jobs' early career came in 1976 when he and Wozniak founded Apple Computer. The company began in the Jobs family garage in Los Altos, California, a location that has since become legendary in Silicon Valley lore. The first product, the Apple I, was essentially a circuit board that hobbyists could use to build their own computers. Wozniak designed the hardware, while Jobs focused on marketing and securing funding. Their first significant order came from the Byte Shop, a local computer store that ordered 50 units at $500 each. Jobs showed early business acumen by convincing suppliers to provide parts on credit and setting up production in the garage. He also demonstrated his persuasive abilities by convincing Wozniak, who was happily employed at Hewlett-Packard, to join Apple full-time. To fund their growing operation, Jobs sold his Volkswagen bus and Wozniak sold his HP Scientific calculator, raising $1,300 in initial capital. The breakthrough came with the Apple II, introduced in 1977. Unlike the Apple I, this was a complete personal computer in a sleek beige case, ready to use out of the box. Jobs insisted on exceptional design and ease of use, qualities that would become hallmarks of Apple products. The Apple II was a tremendous success, becoming one of the first mass-produced microcomputers and establishing Apple as a leader in the nascent personal computer industry. As Apple grew rapidly, Jobs recognized the need for experienced management. In 1978, he recruited Mike Markula, a retired Intel marketing manager, who invested $250,000 in Apple and became the company's chairman. Markula helped Jobs develop a business plan and introduced professional management practices to the young company. In 1978, Apple moved from the garage to its first office building in Cupertino, California. By 1980, Apple had grown from a two-man operation to a publicly traded company with over 1,000 employees. Its initial public offering in December 1980 was the most successful since Ford Motor Company's in 1956, instantly making Jobs a multimillionaire at age 25. With a market value of $1.2 billion, Apple had created more millionaires than any company in history up to that point. However, Jobs' early success at Apple was followed by significant challenges. The Apple III, introduced in 1980, was plagued with technical problems and became the company's first commercial failure. More importantly, Jobs began to face internal competition from the Macintosh team, which he led, and the Apple II team, led by other executives. In 1983, Jobs recruited John Sculley from Pepsi-Cola to serve as Apple's CEO, famously asking him, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" Under Jobs' leadership, the Macintosh team developed a revolutionary computer with a graphical user interface and mouse, inspired by technology Jobs had seen at Xerox PARC. The Macintosh was introduced in January 1984 with a dramatic Super Bowl commercial directed by Ridley Scott, titled 1984, which positioned Apple as a rebellious alternative to IBM's dominance. Despite its innovative design, the original Macintosh had limited commercial success due to its high price and limited software. As sales disappointed, tensions grew between Jobs and Sculley. Jobs' management style, which could be demanding and sometimes harsh, created conflicts within the company. In May 1985, after a power struggle with Sculley, Apple's board sided with the CEO, and Jobs was removed from his operational role at the company he had co-founded. He remained chairman briefly but resigned from Apple entirely in September 1985. This dramatic fall from grace marked the end of Jobs' first chapter at Apple, but it also set the stage for a remarkable period of growth and learning. At just 30 years old, Jobs founded a new computer company called Next Inc., aimed at the education and business markets, although Next would struggle commercially. It developed advanced technology that would eventually bring Jobs back to Apple. Simultaneously, in 1986, Jobs purchased the computer graphics division of Lucasfilm for $10 million and established it as an independent company called Pixar. Initially focused on selling high-end computer graphics hardware, Pixar struggled until it shifted to creating computer-animated films in partnership with Disney. This investment would eventually make Jobs a billionaire when Pixar released Toy Story in 1995 and went public shortly afterward. Jobs' early professional career demonstrated his visionary thinking, his attention to design and user experience, his ability to inspire teams to create revolutionary products, and his sometimes difficult management style. The period from 1976 to 1985 saw him rise from a garage entrepreneur to the leader of a billion-dollar public company, only to lose control of his creation. This dramatic arc set the stage for what would become one of the greatest comeback stories in business history when he returned to Apple in 1997. Personal life and relationships. Steve Jobs' personal life was as complex and multifaceted as his professional one, marked by intense relationships, spiritual seeking, family bonds, and health challenges. Throughout his life, Jobs maintained a certain mystique, being simultaneously very private about some aspects of his life, while allowing others to become part of his public persona. Jobs' early romantic life was complicated. In 1972, while at Reed College, he began dating Chrisanne Brennan. Their relationship was tumultuous and continued on and off for several years. In 1978, Brennan became pregnant with Jobs' child. Initially, Jobs denied paternity, despite a paternity test confirming he was the father. This period marked one of the more controversial aspects of Jobs' personal life, as he initially refused to support his daughter financially, even while Apple was becoming successful. Brennan struggled financially, at times relying on welfare to support herself and their daughter, Lisa Brennan Jobs. Jobs' relationship with Lisa was strained in her early years. He named an early Apple computer project Lisa, though he would deny for years that it was named after his daughter. Over time, however, their relationship improved. Lisa eventually moved in with Jobs and his family during her high school years, and they developed a closer bond, though it remained complicated. Lisa would later become a writer and publish a memoir, Small Fry, detailing her relationship with her father. In 1989, Jobs met Laurene Powell when he gave a lecture at Stanford Business School, where she was a student. They married in a small Buddhist ceremony in Yosemite National Park on March 18, 1991. Together they had 3 children, son Reed, born 1991, and daughters Erin, born 1995, and Eve, born 1998. By all accounts, Jobs was a more present and involved father with his children with Powell than he had been with Lisa in her early years, though he maintained his intense work schedule. Jobs' family life with Powell and their children was relatively private. They lived in a modest, by billionaire standards, home in Palo Alto, California. Jobs was known to be protective of his children's privacy and limited their access to the technology products he created, famously telling a reporter that his kids hadn't used an iPad because he limited how much technology they used at home. Spirituality played an important role in Jobs' personal life. His interest in Eastern philosophy, particularly Zen Buddhism, began in his teenage years and deepened after his trip to India in 1974. He studied with Zen Buddhist teacher Kobun Chino Otagawa, who later presided over his wedding to Powell. Jobs' impressive Buddhist practices influenced his aesthetic sensibilities, his focus on simplicity and design, and his approach to life, particularly after his cancer diagnosis. Jobs maintained several long-term friendships that were important to him. His relationship with Steve Wozniak, though sometimes strained by business matters, remained significant throughout his life. Oracle founder Larry Ellison was a close friend with whom Jobs would take long walks and discuss business and life. Jobs also developed a close relationship with musician Bono of U2, bonding over their shared interest in design and social issues. Jobs' relationship with food was distinctive and sometimes extreme. He was a strict vegetarian for most of his adult life, and at various times followed more restrictive diets, including fruitarianism, eating primarily fruits, nuts, and seeds. His dietary choices were connected to his interest in Eastern philosophy, his concern for animal welfare, and later, his response to his illness. Jobs was known for his Spartan eating habits and could be extremely particular about food. In 2003, Jobs faced a profound personal challenge when he was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. He initially resisted conventional medical treatment, opting instead for alternative approaches, including special diets, acupuncture, and herbal remedies, a decision he would later regret. He eventually underwent surgery in 2004, but the cancer returned, leading to a liver transplant in 2009. His health struggles continued until his death in 2011. Throughout his illness, Jobs was private about the details of his condition while continuing to lead Apple. His gaunt appearance at public events sparked speculation about his health, but he typically deflected questions. This period revealed both his determination to continue his work despite physical challenges and his desire to maintain control over his personal narrative. Jobs' approach to wealth and material possessions was paradoxical. Despite his billions, he lived relatively modestly compared to other tech billionaires. He wore the same uniform of black turtleneck, jeans, and New Balance sneakers for years. His home in Palo Alto, while valuable, was not ostentatious. Yet he could also be exacting about design details and quality, spending years planning the perfect yacht, which was completed after his death, or deliberating for months about what washing machine to buy for his family. Jobs' personal philosophy was perhaps best expressed in his famous 2005 Stanford commencement address, where he spoke about following one's inner voice, the importance of connecting dots looking backward, and how the awareness of death can clarify what truly matters in life. This speech, given after his initial cancer diagnosis, revealed a reflective side of Jobs that contrasted with his sometimes harsh business persona. By the time of his death on October 5, 2011, Jobs had reconciled with many from his past, including his biological family. He had met his biological mother, Joanne Shibley, and his biological sister, novelist Mona Simpson, with whom he developed a close relationship. He also met his biological father, though without revealing his identity to him. These reconnections seemed to bring a measure of closure to the adoption that had shaped his early identity. Jobs' personal life, with its contradictions and complexities, reflected the same intensity and search for perfection that characterized his professional endeavors. His relationships, whether with family, friends, or colleagues, were often intense, sometimes difficult, but frequently transformative for all involved. Major achievements and contributions. Steve Jobs' achievements and contributions span multiple industries and have fundamentally changed how people interact with technology, consume entertainment, and communicate. His impact extends far beyond the products he helped create, influencing design philosophy, business strategy, and consumer culture worldwide. Jobs' most visible achievement was transforming Apple from a garage startup into the world's most valuable company. Under his leadership, Apple revolutionized 6 major industries: personal computers, animated movies, music, phones, tablet computing, and digital publishing. This breadth of impact is unprecedented in modern business history. In personal computing, Jobs' contributions were revolutionary. The Apple II, introduced in 1977, was among the first successful mass-produced microcomputers, helping to launch the personal computer revolution. But it was the Macintosh, introduced in 1984, that truly changed computing. With its graphical user interface, mouse, and emphasis on design and user experience, the Macintosh established a new paradigm for human-computer interaction. Jobs insisted that computers should be intuitive and accessible to non-technical users, a radical concept at the time. After returning to Apple in 1997, Jobs led the company's remarkable turnaround, beginning with the introduction of the iMac in 1998. This colorful, all-in-one computer broke with the beige box aesthetic that dominated the industry and helped restore Apple's reputation for innovation. The subsequent development of Mac OS X provided a stable, Unix-based operating system that combined power with ease of use. In the music industry, Jobs' introduction of the iPod in 2001 and the iTunes Store in 2003 completely transformed how music was distributed and consumed. The iPod wasn't the first digital music player, but its elegant design, intuitive interface, and integration with iTunes made it dominant. The iTunes Store's legal digital download model offered an alternative to rampant music piracy and established a new business model for the digital age. By making deals with major record labels to sell individual songs for 99 cents, Jobs helped save the music industry from the existential threat posed by file-sharing services like Napster. Perhaps Jobs' most significant achievement was the iPhone, introduced in 2007. This revolutionary device combined a phone, internet communicator, and iPod in one handheld product with a touchscreen interface. The iPhone fundamentally changed the mobile phone industry, shifting power from telecommunications carriers to device manufacturers and software developers. The introduction of the App Store in 2008 created an entirely new ecosystem for software development and distribution, spawning countless new businesses and changing how people interact with mobile technology. In 2010, Jobs introduced the iPad, creating the modern tablet computer category. While tablet computers had existed before, the iPad's design, functionality, and ecosystem of apps made it the first commercially successful tablet, opening new possibilities for mobile computing, education, and content consumption. Beyond Apple, Jobs' acquisition and leadership of Pixar represents another transformative achievement. When Jobs purchased the computer graphics division of Lucasfilm in 1986 for $10 million, few could have predicted its eventual impact. Under Jobs' guidance, Pixar pivoted from selling high-end graphics computers to producing computer-animated films. The release of Toy Story in 1995, the first fully computer-animated feature film, revolutionized animation. Pixar went on to create a string of critically acclaimed and commercially successful films, establishing computer animation as the dominant form in the industry. When Disney acquired Pixar in 2006 for $7.4 billion, Jobs became Disney's largest individual shareholder. Jobs also made significant contributions through Next, the company he founded after leaving Apple in 1985. While Next computers achieved only limited commercial success, the company developed advanced technology and software that became crucial when Apple acquired Next in 1997. The Next Step operating system became the foundation for Mac OS X and later iOS, demonstrating how Jobs' wilderness years away from Apple ultimately contributed to the company's future success. Beyond specific products, Jobs made lasting contributions to industrial design. He worked closely with designer Johnny Ive to develop a distinctive Apple aesthetic characterized by simplicity, clean lines, and high-quality materials. This design philosophy influenced not just technology products, but extended to retail spaces, packaging, and user interfaces. The Apple Store concept, introduced in 2001, reinvented retail for technology products and became the highest-grossing retail chain per square foot in the United States. Jobs also pioneered new approaches to supply chain management and manufacturing. Under his leadership, Apple developed sophisticated global supply chains and manufacturing partnerships, particularly in Asia, that enabled the company to produce high-quality products at competitive prices. His attention to detail extended to manufacturing processes and materials, insisting on innovations like specialized glass for iPhone screens or custom aluminum machining techniques. In marketing and communications, Jobs established new standards for product launches and corporate messaging. His keynote presentations, or Stevenotes, became legendary for their carefully crafted narratives and dramatic product reveals. Jobs was a master at creating anticipation and desire for products, understanding that emotional connection was as important as technical specifications. Jobs' business model innovations were equally significant. The integration of hardware, software, and services, what he called the whole widget approach, differentiated Apple from competitors who focused on just one area. This integrated approach allowed Apple to create seamless user experiences and establish higher profit margins than companies selling commodity hardware. The App Store represented another business model innovation, creating a curated marketplace where developers could reach customers directly, while Apple maintained quality control and took a percentage of sales. This model has been widely imitated across the technology industry and beyond. Perhaps most importantly, Jobs changed how people think about and interact with technology. He insisted that technology should be not just functional, but beautiful, not just powerful, but intuitive, not just useful, but delightful. By focusing on the intersection of technology and liberal arts, as he often described it, Jobs created products that became deeply integrated into people's lives and identities. By the time of his death in 2011, Jobs had built Apple into the world's most valuable company and left a legacy of innovation that continues to influence technology, design, entertainment, and business. His achievements demonstrate the power of vision, attention to detail, and unwavering commitment to creating products that, in his words, make a dent in the universe. Challenges and obstacles overcome. Steve Jobs faced numerous significant challenges and obstacles throughout his life and career, overcoming them through a combination of determination, adaptability, vision, and sometimes sheer force of will. These challenges shaped his character and contributed to his eventual success. One of Jobs' earliest challenges was his adoption. While his adoptive parents, Paul and Clara Jobs, were loving and supportive, Jobs later described feeling abandoned by his biological parents. This sense of being chosen rather than abandoned was a narrative he constructed to cope with this early life challenge. His search for identity and meaning would continue throughout his life, influencing his interest in Eastern philosophy and his sometimes rebellious nature. During his education, Jobs struggled with conventional schooling. He was intelligent but restless, often bored with traditional teaching methods and resistant to authority. He overcame this challenge by finding mentors who recognized his potential and by pursuing knowledge on his own terms. His decision to drop out of Reed College after one semester was risky, but he continued to audit classes that interested him, including the calligraphy course that would later influence Apple's typography. When Jobs and Wozniak started Apple in 1976, they faced the enormous challenge of building a business with minimal resources. Jobs had no formal business training, limited capital, and was entering an industry dominated by established companies like IBM and Hewlett-Packard. He overcame these obstacles through a combination of vision, persuasiveness, and strategic partnerships. He convinced Wozniak to leave his secure job at HP, persuaded suppliers to provide parts on credit, and attracted key early employees and investors, including Mike Markkula, who brought capital and business expertise to the young company. As Apple grew rapidly, Jobs faced the challenge of managing a large organization, a skill set very different from founding a startup. His management style during this period was often described as harsh and divisive. He could be brutally critical of work he didn't consider excellent, and sometimes pitted teams against each other. This approach created internal conflicts and contributed to his eventual ouster from Apple in 1985. This painful experience forced Jobs to develop more effective leadership skills during his time at Next and Pixar. The failure of Next as a hardware company represented another significant challenge. Despite creating technologically advanced computers, Next struggled to find a market for its expensive machines. Jobs overcame this setback by pivoting the company to focus on software, developing the Next Step operating system that would eventually become valuable to Apple. This experience taught Jobs about the importance of price points and market positioning, lessons he would apply when he returned to Apple. At Pixar, Jobs faced years of financial losses before the company achieved success. He had initially purchased the company from Lucasfilm for $10 million in 1986, intending it to sell high-end computer graphics workstations. When this business model failed, Jobs kept the company alive through personal investment, reportedly putting in over $50 million of his own money. He supported Pixar's pivot to animation software and short films, eventually leading to a partnership with Disney to produce Toy Story. This challenge required tremendous patience and faith in the company's creative talent, particularly John Lasseter. Jobs' perseverance was rewarded when Pixar went public in 1995, instantly making him a billionaire. Perhaps the greatest professional challenge Jobs faced was returning to Apple in 1997, when the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Apple had lost direction, was bleeding money, and had a confusing product line with low-quality offerings. The company had approximately 90 days of operating capital remaining. Jobs made difficult but necessary decisions, including cutting 70% of the product line, laying off 3,000 employees, and making the controversial decision to partner with Microsoft, Apple's longtime rival. He focused the company on creating a small number of exceptional products rather than a wide range of mediocre ones. This turnaround strategy worked brilliantly, setting the stage for Apple's subsequent innovations and growth. The development of the iPhone presented enormous technical and business challenges. Jobs pushed his teams to create technology that didn't yet exist, including a multi-touch display that was both accurate and durable. He negotiated with reluctant telecommunications carriers who were accustomed to controlling the mobile experience. The original iPhone development was so challenging that Jobs fired the project manager and replaced the entire operating system just months before launch. Despite these obstacles, Jobs insisted on maintaining his vision for a revolutionary device, resulting in a product that transformed the mobile industry. On a personal level, Jobs faced the ultimate challenge when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2003. He initially resisted conventional medical treatment, a decision he later regretted. When he did undergo surgery in 2004, the cancer had spread. Despite his deteriorating health, Jobs continued to lead Apple, introducing the iPhone in 2007 and the iPad in 2010. He took medical leaves when necessary, but returned to work whenever possible, demonstrating remarkable determination and commitment. Even as his health failed, he worked on plans for new Apple products and the company's new headquarters. Throughout his career, Jobs faced criticism for his management style, which could be demanding and sometimes harsh. He worked to overcome this challenge by developing more effective leadership approaches while maintaining his high standards. After returning to Apple, he became more skilled at balancing his push for perfection with the need to motivate and retain talented employees. He built a strong executive team that could execute his vision while adding their own expertise. Jobs also had to overcome the challenge of his own perfectionism, which sometimes delayed products or increased costs. He learned to make necessary compromises while still maintaining the core integrity of his vision. For example, the original iPhone shipped without copy and paste functionality or third-party apps, features that were added in later versions once they could be implemented to Jobs' standards. By the end of his life, Jobs had overcome numerous personal and professional challenges to build Apple into the world's most valuable company. His ability to learn from failures, adapt his approach while maintaining his core principles, and persevere through setbacks demonstrates a remarkable resilience. In his famous Stanford commencement address, Jobs noted that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it freed him to enter one of the most creative periods of his life. This ability to find opportunity in adversity was one of Jobs' most important qualities and a key factor in his ultimate success. Legacy and impact on the world. Steve Jobs' legacy and impact on the world are profound and multifaceted, extending far beyond the products he helped create or the companies he built. His influence spans technology, design, entertainment, retail, and business strategy, fundamentally changing how people interact with digital devices and consume media. At the most visible level, Jobs transformed personal technology through Apple's revolutionary products. The Macintosh introduced the graphical user interface to mainstream computing. The iPod and iTunes Store revolutionized the music industry. The iPhone redefined mobile communication and computing, while the iPad created the modern tablet category. These devices weren't just incremental improvements. They represented fundamental rethinking of how technology should work and how people should interact with it. Jobs' insistence that technology should be both powerful and intuitive changed the relationship between humans and machines. Before Apple's influence, technology was often designed by engineers for engineers, with complex interfaces that required technical knowledge to operate. Jobs championed the idea that technology should be accessible to everyone, hiding complexity behind simple, elegant interfaces. This philosophy has become the dominant approach in consumer technology, influencing everything from website design to home appliances. The App Store, introduced in 2008, created an entirely new ecosystem for software development and distribution. By providing a platform where developers could easily reach customers and users could safely download applications, Jobs helped spawn countless new businesses and career opportunities. The app economy he helped create now generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually and employs millions of developers worldwide. In industrial design, Jobs' collaboration with Jony Ive established new standards for product aesthetics and materials. Their focus on simplicity, quality materials, and attention to detail influenced design across industries. The distinctive Apple aesthetic, minimalist, elegant, and user-focused, has been widely imitated in products ranging from smartphones to household appliances. Jobs elevated design from a superficial concern to a fundamental aspect of product development, famously declaring that design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. The retail industry was transformed by Jobs' vision for the Apple Store. When Apple opened its first retail locations in 2001, traditional electronics retailers were focused on cramming as many products as possible into warehouse-like spaces. Jobs reimagined retail as an experience, with spacious, well-designed stores where customers could try products, get expert advice, and attend workshops. The Apple Store model has been widely imitated across retail categories and remains the highest-grossing retail chain per square foot in the United States. In the entertainment industry, Jobs' leadership of Pixar revolutionized animation. Toy Story, released in 1995, was the first fully computer-animated feature film and established a new standard for storytelling and technical excellence in animation. Pixar's subsequent films continued this tradition of innovation, while maintaining an extraordinary record of critical and commercial success. When Disney acquired Pixar in 2006, Jobs became Disney's largest individual shareholder, giving him influence over one of the world's most important entertainment companies. Jobs also transformed the music industry through the iPod and iTunes Store. When digital music first emerged, the industry was paralyzed by piracy and unable to develop viable digital business models. Jobs convinced major record labels to sell individual songs through iTunes for 99 cents, creating a legal alternative to piracy that was convenient for consumers. This model saved the music industry from potential collapse and established the template for digital content distribution that would later extend to movies, TV shows, books, and apps. In business strategy, Jobs pioneered the integrated approach that has become Apple's hallmark. Rather than focusing solely on hardware or software, Apple creates ecosystems where devices, operating systems, applications, and services work together seamlessly. This whole widget philosophy differentiated Apple from competitors and allowed the company to create superior user experiences while maintaining higher profit margins. Many companies have since attempted to replicate this integrated approach. Jobs' management philosophy, though controversial at times, has influenced leadership thinking. His focus on small, empowered teams, his emphasis on excellence rather than compromise, and his ability to inspire people to achieve more than they thought possible have become case studies in business schools worldwide. His famous reality distortion field, the ability to convince people that the impossible was possible, demonstrated the power of vision and persuasion in leadership. In marketing and communications, Jobs established new standards for product launches and corporate messaging. His keynote presentations became legendary for their carefully crafted narratives and dramatic product reveals. Jobs understood that emotional connection was as important as technical specifications, focusing on how products would improve people's lives rather than just listing features. This approach to marketing has been widely adopted across industries. Jobs' personal story, from garage entrepreneur to business icon, including his dramatic fall and redemptive return to Apple, has become part of modern mythology. His 2005 Stanford commencement address, with its message about following your passion and connecting the dots of life's experiences, has been viewed millions of times and continues to inspire people worldwide. His biography by Walter Isaacson became an international bestseller, and his life has been the subject of multiple films and documentaries. Perhaps most significantly, Jobs changed how people think about technology's role in their lives. He understood that technology wasn't just about utility, but about identity, creativity, and human connection. Apple products became not just tools, but extensions of their users' personalities and aspirations. This emotional connection between people and their devices represents a profound shift in the relationship between humans and technology. Jobs' legacy also includes the continued success of Apple after his death. The company he rebuilt has maintained its position as one of the world's most valuable and innovative companies. The Apple Park campus, which Jobs helped design before his death, stands as a physical embodiment of his vision, a blend of technological sophistication and natural beauty. Critics note that Jobs' legacy includes some negatives as well. His sometimes harsh management style, Apple's closed ecosystem approach that limits user freedom in some ways, and concerns about manufacturing conditions in the company's supply chain. These aspects of his legacy continue to be debated and have influenced discussions about technology ethics and corporate responsibility. Nevertheless, Jobs' overall impact has been transformative. He didn't just create successful products or build a valuable company. He changed how people interact with technology, consume entertainment, communicate with each other, and even how they think about design and beauty in everyday objects. Few individuals have had such a wide-ranging influence on modern life and culture. As Jobs himself might have put it, he made a significant dent in the universe. Steve Jobs' life journey offers profound lessons that extend far beyond technology or business. His story is one of vision, resilience, and the courage to think differently, qualities that can inspire anyone seeking to make their own impact on the world. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of Jobs' story is his ability to transform setbacks into opportunities. When he was forced out of Apple in 1985, the company he co-founded, it would have been easy to retreat into bitterness or self-doubt. Instead, he used this painful experience as a catalyst for growth, later reflecting that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. During his wilderness years away from Apple, he founded Next and transformed Pixar, developing the skills, perspective, and technologies that would eventually fuel Apple's renaissance when he returned. This capacity to find opportunity in adversity reminds us that our greatest challenges often contain the seeds of our greatest growth. Jobs' unwavering commitment to his vision, even when others couldn't see it, demonstrates the power of believing in your own path. When he introduced the iPhone in 2007, many industry experts were skeptical. The established phone manufacturers dismissed it, with Palm's CEO famously saying, "PC guys are not going to just figure this out. They're not going to just walk in." Yet Jobs had the courage to pursue his vision of what a phone could be, completely reimagining the device and creating a new category of mobile computing. His ability to see possibilities where others saw limitations reminds us of the importance of maintaining our own vision. Even when conventional wisdom suggests otherwise, the intersection of technology and humanities was central to Jobs' approach. He often said that Apple existed at the intersection of technology and liberal arts, understanding that technical capability alone wasn't enough to create truly revolutionary products. This perspective is reflected in his famous quote, "It's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the results that make our hearts sing." In a world that often separates technical and creative thinking, Jobs reminds us of the power that comes from integrating different domains of knowledge and experience. Jobs' attention to detail, sometimes described as obsessive, reflected his belief that excellence matters in every aspect of a product, even those that users might never consciously notice. He insisted on beautiful circuit boards inside computers that users would never see, and spent weeks deciding on the exact shade of gray for bathroom signs in Apple stores. This commitment to excellence in even the smallest details reminds us that how we do anything is how we do everything, and that true quality comes from caring deeply about all aspects of our work, not just the visible ones. The importance of simplicity was a core principle for Jobs. He understood that achieving simplicity is actually more difficult than embracing complexity, famously saying, "Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple." In products, this meant removing features rather than adding them, focusing on what was truly essential. In life, it meant periodically clearing away accumulated possessions and commitments to focus on what truly mattered. In a world of increasing complexity and distraction, Jobs' emphasis on simplicity reminds us of the clarity and power that comes from focusing on what's truly important. Jobs' life also demonstrates the value of connecting seemingly unrelated experiences. His interest in calligraphy at Reed College seemed irrelevant to his future in technology, yet it later informed the typography and design aesthetic of the Macintosh. His exploration of Eastern philosophy influenced his approach to product design and business. As he said in his Stanford address, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward." This perspective encourages us to pursue diverse interests and experiences, trusting that they will connect in meaningful ways in the future. Perhaps most inspiringly, Jobs understood that awareness of mortality can clarify what truly matters in life. After his cancer diagnosis, he spoke openly about how the knowledge that his time was limited helped him focus on what was truly important. "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. As we reflect on Jobs' life journey, remarkable journey from garage entrepreneur to global icon, what emerges is not just the story of a brilliant innovator, but of someone who continuously sought to live authentically and make a meaningful contribution to the world. Despite his flaws and contradictions, or perhaps because of how he worked to overcome them, Jobs' life reminds us that our greatest fulfillment comes not from conforming to others' expectations, but from having the courage to follow our own path and create something that reflects our unique vision and values. In the end, Jobs' greatest legacy may be not just the products he created or the companies he built, but the example he set of a life lived with purpose, passion, and the courage to think differently. As he told the Stanford graduates, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. In these words and in the way he lived his life, Steve Jobs continues to inspire us to pursue our own vision and make our own dent in the universe.